Hey there, I'm Alan Firstenberg.
And I'm Mark Tucker. Welcome to Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Hey Mark, how you doing?
Doing well. New Year's off and going.
Indeed it is. And often going, we're trying this new recording format. We'll see how it goes. Uh, that's kind of one of the things going for the new year. But coming into the new year, we also have kind of a carryover from last year. A bit of a gift, shall we say, from the Alexa team.
Yes, so back at the end of November, I saw the announcement for the new version of Alexa Presentation Language, APL, uh, and it is number 2023.3. Following their nomenclature, and it's just been a while since I've had a chance to dig in and kind of see what was going on with it, and this is our first chance to talk about it.
Yeah. So, can you give us a quick reminder of what APL is for starters?
Some people could call it that it is HTML for Alexa devices, but it is the proprietary Amazon specific, Alexa specific, JSON based language for designing screens and widgets for Alexa. So you declaratively use components that are defined in JSON, use data binding, also data stores for widgets to provide data, and that is the kind of the responsive way of doing screen screens for screen devices for Echo Show and on other devices.
Right, and I think the declarative part's kind of the real the real element about this that makes it so much different than HTML, JavaScript.
Yeah.
While we've seen things that are that make those tools declarative and make them kind of more event driven. I think really Alexa and APL really take that to heart. That's really at the core of what these systems are. So it's if you're used to writing a function, that's not really how this is going to work.
Yeah, so think about it as, if you're coming from a web world where you might have done single page applications. So the concept of you define a screen, you define a component, and you do data binding to connect that together, then that's this kind of the same approach that APL uses. Also, if you've done anything with Microsoft's adaptive cards, adaptive cards is also a way to declare a screen and then use data binding. So it's a kind of the declarative layout and definition plus then data binding is the gist of it. APL does more. In some ways it's pretty crazy what you can do with it, but that's the gist. That's the main bread and butter of APL.
Right, and I think of it in terms of if you're used to React, you kind of
Yeah.
it's not quite the same, but you have the same flavor
Yeah, it's the
of how
same flavor,
APL
same
works.
approach. You'd have to learn a whole new syntax and stuff. It's not like you can bring exactly those skills over to APL. Not necessarily that you have to be an APL expert. I did a series of videos a while ago now that kind of went through each of the different parts of components, and so I kind of feel like I know APL pretty well. But then it's one of those things that you use when you're doing some new project, and then you might put it on the shelf and not come back to it for 4 months, 6 months, something like that. So I kind of felt like over the holiday break, I had a chance to do work on a new project, and it has APL, it has for screens, and it has widgets, and in some ways I kind of had to relearn or remind myself of kind of some of the approaches or how to do things, look at some past things. So it's not something that you might know all of what's going on. And so then what's nice about this new release and the way that Amazon does releases is that they do give you a summary pages of like these are the things that are new in this release, and you can actually go back and look at past versions of documents, and then you kind of just have to figure out, well, what version am I going to target for the project that I'm doing? there's kind of a whole versioning strategy, and you can kind of go crazy and, have things that are backwards compatible and then things that are new, but then check the version of the actual APL that's running. But I kind of don't do that. I just kind of go back and say, oh, let's pick a couple of versions back and target for that version and just hope for the best.
So maybe even that's the right place to begin is what devices have or are getting this new release.
Yeah, so I'm going to have to look at the document page, because that's part of, and we'll provide a link to this page. That's the summary. But at the end of each page, there is a section that talks about kind of the approach to how you handle APL versioning and things that you can do with that. But also, they've started going through and saying, for this device, this is what version of APL is running on that version. So, for example, so far we have Echo Show 15, which is the kind of the bigger ones that can go in landscape or portrait mode, and those are the ones that always have widgets present. Echo Show 10 is the one that kind of rotates around. It's the one that can follow you as you're walking and talking. Echo Show 8, and then there's Echo Show 5, the first and second generation version. Some of the newer versions of Echo Show 5, the original Echo Show, Echo Spot, Fire TV, and Fire tablets don't quite yet have 2023.3. They're running on 2023.2. But there's a nice little note that to be announced of when. So I think what they're trying to tell you is that in the future there is plans to get 2023.3 on it. We just haven't announced when that's going to be yet, as opposed to, I guess at some point in the future they could say this device is no longer going to run the newer versions of APL, but it seems like they're targeting a big swath of, I think probably 90% of the devices, or maybe even all of them. At one point we'll get 2023.3, but they're focusing on some of the more popular ones.
Okay, so at least we're kind of expecting 2023.3 to have wide availability.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is expected. Though I do want to tell you something that's kind of weird that I did learn. I was trying to use some of the newer features in 2023.3 in a widget that's hosted on my Echo Show 15, and it wasn't working. And so I actually contacted somebody on a contact that I know from Amazon, and he was like, "That's maybe the feature on the home screen is actually running an older version of APL, even though the device is supposed to target a bigger version. Maybe the kind of the widget panel that's always present is running a different version." And sure enough, there's an environment variable you can put into APL that tells you what APL version it's running. And actually, the widgets on my Echo Show 15 is running 2023.1. So it's confusing because I haven't done this yet, but I'm wondering if I put that same variable into an APL screen that runs full screen, if that will be a different version. So widgets is a little bit of a different animal, and so you might have to target an older version of APL specifically for widgets, even though it might say that the Echo Show 15 supports the latest version.
Well, that's interesting. So let's go through what some of these changes are.
Okay. Yeah, and some of them, it's a little bit of a head scratcher to me as far as like, okay, obviously somebody needed this feature, but I don't know, I haven't thought of how I would use it yet. So I may not be able to like give you tons of details on why you might want to do something with it, but we'll kind of talk about it. So one of the first thing that's on this screen is talking about something called conditional imports. So when you define an APL document, there's a certain document format, like what version of APL is that document running at, and then there's different sections. There could be a section that includes styles, which are colors or sizes or things based on, you can give those names and then you can use them later on in your document, kind of like CSS. There's a resources section. There's a layout section where you can define individual components, and then there's like a main template section of your document where you can then reference those layouts as components in your main screen. And I do that quite a bit. Actually, just a nice way to break out certain sections of my document, like this project I'm working on, has a pager that goes through and shows 4 different screens. So each screen is a separate component. And then I've got some reusable parts that I've made that show up on multiple pages or multiple times on a page. So then I create that as a separate layout. So reason why I'm giving you that detail is that you could break out some of those things that are reusable into a separate JSON file and host them yourself, and then import that in so that the document that you've got is smaller but includes or imports in additional APL documents. So then you could make use of any of those resources, styles, layouts, commands, other things that you define in that document. So the way that importing worked before is that you would just give a straight import, and it would import them in the order that you, there's an import section that has an array of imports, and you would give it the source URL of where this document is, and it would just load it in that order. Oh, what I also need to say is that there are 2 or 3 different special named packages that Amazon defines, and they kind of record in a certain registry. So if you don't have the source property but just the name, it will look up and say, oh, this is the Alexa layout. So this is the Alexa, viewports. So there's some built-in ones that they include. So any of their special documents or just special components that are responsive are included in a package, and you just import that package in. So then that's kind of how they provide the extensibility features of additional components over time is using this same approach. But so all that has already been there with importing. What's new with importing is the ability to do conditional imports. So if you were to look at the layouts document that you can import in from Amazon, it's got a lot of different components, and it's doing conditionals inside of there, saying, oh, if the viewport's this way, or if it's on a TV versus a tablet versus an Echo Show device, it can look differently if it's portrait versus landscape. So they've got a whole bunch of conditional logic and all of that stuff, and that's how they've approached it. But now with this conditional imports, it gives you an additional feature. So for example, you could have styles that are specific to the TV, and you can have those in one package, and then you can conditionally say, if this is running on a TV device, just import just that portion that's the styles and everything that are specific to TV in. So I think they're kind of setting themselves up to be able to break out what they're doing into other files based on some conditionals, whether what type of device, what type of viewport it's running.
And that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. So that makes sense. So it means that you'll be able to import properties based on whether you have your 15 in portrait or landscape mode.
Yeah.
So the layout will now look different, and you don't have to code all of that logic into the APL itself.
Yeah.
You put that logic into the separate package, and you import the right package at the right time.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and because I think the way I think about it too is right now when you're importing in the layouts package, you're getting a whole bunch of stuff that's not specific to the device that you're running on. And plus it has to be more complex because it's like, okay, this component here, but at this point in time I might look different, so I have to do what's called a when property and do some conditional. So it makes the imported APL more complicated and bigger if it's all in one. And that could also affect load times if you have to import lots of things that are big. Well, the last part I want to talk about on imports, because this is kind of big, is that you can define what order things get loaded in. So like if document A is your document and it's got imports for B and C, and both B and C have a dependency on D, then the order is A, B, C, D. And so if you've got something defined in multiple locations, the topmost one wins. So you can now define what order different things load in, which you couldn't do before. So you might be able to have some override, like have a special file that's overrides and just apply the overrides after other things happen or some things like that.
Okay,
So
good.
that's imports.
Okay, what else?
All right, so the next thing is talking about two new commands. One is called insert item and remove item. So if you think about how how HTML works, and there's a DOM, and you can add components into the DOM or remove items from the DOM, this is kind of what this does. So you can use these commands because commands are the ways that you can tie to some sort of trigger. So like if a button press or some other thing that fires an event can issue a command, and then the command can do things. So this is the ability where you could add a new section to the APL document or remove a section out of the document using these insert item and remove item commands.
This is great because it used to be that you needed to define everything beforehand and just display or not display them.
Yeah. So either use like some sort of a and the trick with the when conditional is that there's only a certain time when those get evaluated. So when the document gets inflated, is what it's called. Then those whens are defined, and so you find yourself doing things like adding a conditional to the opacity property and switching it from 0 to 1, or adding there's a display property which is like none or visible or hidden, and you can do a conditional on that. So plus it's also kind of what's complicated is if you're doing a list of things based on data, then you have the initial data that then shows the list of items. But then if you were to say, oh, I want to add an item to the list, then you can't really, it doesn't reevaluate the data. And so this gives you a way to add it. Now, it's important to note that it's not changing the original document that you created, nor is it changing the data that you're using to create the document. It's only during the time that that document is running. So like if you were to go off the document and then come back, then that change wouldn't be there anymore. You would have to do that, reflecting a change in the data behind the scenes as well, so that that would work. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense. But yeah, okay. I mean, that's kind of what I expect.
Yeah, and then there's a new event that you can trigger on a document that saying on children change, so you can get notified if a child is added or removed. So the next item is control over scrolling and paging. So there is a number of different components that allows you to scroll through a list of things, and there's different things that you can hit, like scrolling to an index. You can but you might want to control the speed of how fast that happens. Also, like on a pager control, when you're paging from one page to another page, you might want to make that transition slower or faster, right? And so on certain events now or commands like set page and things, you can define a duration property of like how far is that transition, how fast is the transition speed or things like that. So
Okay, so this is one of those, this sounds great. I'm sure this is important to someone, but I'm equally sure that advanced transition systems are also important to someone. The fact that you start the paging slow and then speed up through a bunch of stuff and then slow down again as you're approaching, and it sounds like this doesn't handle that.
yeah, no, this is just more the actual speed of the transition. There are some capabilities, and I haven't really delved into it, that you can do custom type of transitions and control the animations more on a fine grain. But this one is just overall, once you've got a transition defined, it's like how fast does that transition happen?
Okay, next.
Okay, so there are some accessibility improvements that they talked about, that like an actions property. I didn't really get this. I don't totally understand where kind of the overall approach for accessibility on APL. So I looked into it. I saw that you could define multiple actions per physical touch, like a thumbs up plus some other type of press thing. This is one of those ones I looked at it initially, kind of scratched my head and said, I don't. There needs to be more documentation or information on kind of the overarching accessibility approach, because I'm not sure what this gives me. So sorry. Wish I knew more about this one, but this one was a little confusing. There's a deprecation on the frame component. Well, I guess there used to be a background color property on the frame component, and it's going away. So it's being deprecated, being replaced with just a background property. And now that background property is more advanced. It can do a solid color or a gradient color. So it's basically a new property.
Okay.
So now your frames can have gradients as opposed to solid colors. This next one is interesting. So normally with data arrays, you assign that to a component, like a container, and you can say here's an array of 5 strings, item 1, item 2, item 3, item 4, item 5. Then the container has an items property, and what it does is it takes the first child. In the case of data binding, it takes that first child of the items property, and it duplicates that, uses it as a template, and duplicates that once for each of the items in the data array. So that's how you get, how you can take a list of something and display it in a component, is with this data property that's assigned to the component. Now, with commands, there are two. You can either fire single commands off, or you can do multiple commands. And if you use the sequential command, then it's going to do command 1, and then once it finishes, it's going to execute command 2, command 3. Parallel is going to say, here's all of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, all are going to be executed at the same time. There is a new data property to those sequential and parallel commands. Now that seems kind of weird, but there are some things that you can do now. You can define an array of something, and then for each item in the array, it's going to execute the command. So you can get some different effects with that. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to use it. The way that they used the example that they showed had a list of items, and then when you clicked on a button, it triggered a command, and then the parallel or sequential, the data that was bound to that command was randomly picking colors. So then it would change the color of item 1 to some color item 2, and it would either sequentially you change the color of 1, then of 2, then of 3, whereas the parallel would just change all the colors at once. It seems like it's going to be a fun trick to use for something. I just don't know what I'm going to use this for in the future. But there could be a way where you've got a list of data things that you want, or iterate through, but then execute commands on. So
I can kind of see it in cases, for example, where you've got a bunch of buttons and you want to mark all of them as inactive, not clear them, but mark them as inactive. And this is just a way to say, mark all of these as inactive. Maybe? I don't know.
Maybe? Yeah. Because you could easily do a sequence, and you can set a set of value, have a set value command, and each of those buttons are named. You right now, without this, you could still set them, but maybe there's an easier way of just saying, I want to set this, have one set command property, but then use this data, and it would iterate through the list of buttons. But maybe dynamically with data that you're doing, maybe you want something to.
That's just what I was. Yeah, that's just what I was thinking. Is how much of this is dynamic data and how much of this is tied to adding children and so forth. So if the two commands make sense together, or I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah.
what's next?
Next is support for variable sized viewports. So a viewport is the size of the screen, and now there's some properties: auto height, auto width, min width, max height, max width. I think some of those were available, and I know that there were some things that were already in place. If you had like a tablet and you were changing from landscape mode to portrait mode and back and forth. I'm not sure what this variable viewport is. I don't know if this is going to be some feature in the future, or if like they put them in there for widgets, or I'm not exactly sure what they're doing.
I was about to ask if they had something to do with widgets, because widgets can expand and change size, and you move them from the small thing to take up half the screen sometimes. Does that make sense in that
Yeah,
context?
I'm not sure what would be interesting. What I thought about when I saw this, and I haven't heard anything about this, but right now you've got on Echo Show 15 in landscape mode, you've got like 2/3 of the screen that's showing something, kind of iterating through what would typically be on an Echo Show device, and then the other portion is a set of fixed widgets. What would be interesting is right now, if you hit a widget to launch your skill, then it takes up the whole screen. What would be interesting is if that stayed the same and just that section off to the side changed. So
Right.
I don't know, and I don't know if this might have something to do with TV.
Okay. Anything else?
Oh, okay. So the next thing is Lottie files. So Lottie files
Oh, yay.
are they're around. They're kind of a way of doing animation, but you can't run Lottie files directly in APL
Well,
because
and let's say why, but you can't run Lottie files automatically in APL because Lottie files tend to deal with SVG, and
yes,
APL doesn't support SVG. It supports its own flavor of it called AVG.
yes. So in order for an SVG to be shown in APL, it has to be converted to an AVG. Since Lottie files use animation of SVGs, then you can't really. You have to be there has to be some sort of conversion from Lottie file format into an AVG, so that it can run an APL. But there has been limited support for Lottie files, and sometimes it's been kind of cumbersome. The resulting converted file. So there's been some optimizations on the conversion of Lottie files into AVG and support of additional things like gradients and images. So basically all that's saying is that we support a wider variety of Lottie files to be converted into. I haven't
Okay.
really spent a lot of time creating Lottie files, and have had limited success with converting Lottie files in the past to AVG. Maybe my luck would be increased now since it supports a few other things.
Okay.
All right, so now there's kind of like a grab bag of additional other updates. As part of APL, a number of different functions are supported. So to the list of string functions that are supported, it's added char@, so you can get a character at a specific position in a string.
Th- this is one of my many issues with APL, is that they had to go reinvent a pile of things,
Yes.
and they forget things like carat
Yeah.
as one of them. And it's not the only thing that they forgot either. So kudos to them though for finally including something that JavaScript actually had since day one.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, JavaScript even got this right. Anyway, kudos to the APL team though.
Yes. So vector graphic is the component that displays Alexa vector graphics. Now it's been expanded or improved, better support for parameters. So you can specify parameters that when you're using a vector graphic component, you can pass parameters to the actual graphic AVG behind the scenes, and could take in those parameters, Could be like fill color, it could be size, it could be opacity, it could be something, probably something with animations. I don't know. There's different parameter things. So that's just a new feature if you're parameterizing your AVGs. There's some extensions that are possible for APL. The way that I see extensions are, they are Amazon provided code that runs on the device and has to communicate back to APL. So like if your device supports what's called the backstack, then you can kind of simulate what would be in HTML history. You could say, oh, I want to go back 2 documents in my HTML history. So that's an extension called backstack. There's a couple of other ones I'm trying to remember. There's one that has to do with like the Echo Show 10, if it identifies you when you're walking up to the camera. I think there even might be one for motion, if it supports motion. I don't remember all there's not very many of them, but it's kind of device specific functionality. You know, some of the devices have that can support, so you can define extensions, and now there's a required flag that you can set, so, which basically says if your APL requires this extension, then the code's not going to run, your APL is not going to run on devices that don't support that. So
this is a silly question.
Yeah.
But
I don't know if I know the answer, but go ahead.
If you are including the extension, don't you require it automatically? I mean, why would you include something you don't require? Okay.
Well, this is I've always felt, my first experience with extensions had to do with this backstack, and it had to do with APL running on TVs, because there are ways to have you go back to documents with a button, and it kind of like everything else worked one way and the TV worked differently, and so it's basically if the TV supported the backstack, then I had code that would use the backstack approach, because that was really the only approach you could use. And then on non-TVs, it would do it the other way. And so I've found extensions a little frustrating, because like, why didn't they just program the TV to work the same way and not have to do special backstack code just for the TV? But
and is this in any way related to the conditional imports?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Let's see. There are probably the last thing is that there are a set of APL cheat sheets. So it's 4 pages. That's kind of a summary of like, here's all the components that we give you, and here's the properties that are on the components, and these are the ones that are required in the default properties. It's actually a pretty good list. So in 4 pages, you can kind of get a glimpse of all the different components that are available. So they've updated the cheat sheets to include the latest 2023.3 features. So kudos to that. The rest of this document, we've already kind of gone through the section that talked about which versions are supported in which different documents. My feedback was, if somehow widgets are working with a different version of APL than the main thing, then you probably should have another column or something in here that talks about which, Echo Show 15 widgets run on this version or something.
Maybe that should be documented somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, because otherwise it's just...
my first question on all of this is all great, but has APL Ninja been updated to support 2023.3 yet?
I don't know that it has for sure. And this is interesting and kind of why, because I use APL Ninja. I'm a huge fan of it. And so for this project I was working on, I was creating APL, and everything looked good. I wasn't getting any errors in my editor, the JSON window. But then when I went to go deploy this widget, and kind of the way that you have to go deploy a widget is you actually have to push the skill back up to the developer console with a manifest file and things like that. But then if you go into the developer console, you can go into a multimedia or multimodal tab, which then shows you, oh, here's this widget. So I went into that widget there and looked at the JSON panel there, and there were errors in it. And some of them were things that it wasn't supporting with, 2023.3, like the parameters on the vector graphics I was using. Or there were a couple of other things that was just, I wouldn't have known. The only place I would have known that the errors were there was in this particular view that the developer console gives you. So I guess, warning to people that are doing the APL Ninja approach first, because there's just so many nice things in APL Ninja that I definitely prefer that approach. But then you might have to go back and check. And the thing is in order to get that widget to show on your device, you actually have to do a special deploy through this particular console window inside the developer console. And in order to do that, you have to do, whenever you save a new widget document, you actually have to go and build the skill. So there's something, building typically has been in the past about something with the language model. Oh, I've added some intents or utterances, or expanded the list of slot values or something. So I have to rebuild the model so that I can test the model, and that makes sense. But somehow deploying a widget is also linked to I have to build. And so the build was failing because of a entry in my widget JSON. So I couldn't even deploy a new version of the language model because that would break the build. So just some strange quirkiness. I don't know. There's lots of things I kind of learned. It was kind of good. I was like, it's good I was doing this side project, because I kind of learned some things about APL, specifically with widgets, it breaking the build or it being on a different version than was documented for the device. But that's the versions. And then there's a section at the very end of this document that's like strategies on how to run like backwards compatibility. So like in one code base, run something that uses some newer versions and a feature for those devices that are actually on newer versions of APL versus those are on older versions. And the way that I solve that is I just ignore that and I code for an older version of APL that I think everything should have on, or most everything can have on, and hope for the best.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, like I said, and that goes back to, what versions, what platforms is this supported on, and if nearly all of them is the answer, maybe that's the right solution.
Yeah, well,
Anyway,
I consider myself somebody who's very passionate about APL, but coding specific versions or for backward compatible versions is a little more hardcore than I want to be. So I would be hard pressed to figure out the list of developers that are more hardcore than me on APL that would want to do that approach. But I'd love to meet you if you're listening to this and that's something that you do, because maybe I can learn something from you.
and if you want to meet Mark and let him know what you think about this, you can find us on social media on LinkedIn, or let us know in the comments below. Love to hear what folks think about this new version of APL, APL in general, maybe even what we're hoping from Amazon with future APL, if such a thing exists. And we will talk about it another time on Two Voice Devs.
Two voice devs. Take care, Alan.
Take care, Mark. Have a great week.
Thank you. You too.